Why is this video worth watching? It gives concrete examples of disinformation and manipulation aimed at dividing nations. If you understand how Russian propaganda works, which has taken Poles and Ukrainians as its targets, you will protect yourself against the manipulation and not give Putin's virus a chance. Here we go. Polish-Ukrainian relations are particularly important for Russia, as cooperation between Poland and Ukraine prevents Russia from pursuing its imperial plans. This has been well demonstrated since February 24, 2022, when Poland became one of Ukraine's key allies, and without the help of the Poles, Putin would be already holding power in Kiev. Head of the Security Service of Ukraine, Vasily Hrytsak, in 2017 said this: "The special services of the Russian Federation are actively working to infiltrate Russian agents into the ranks of Ukrainian patriotic organizations and to recruit Ukrainian patriots with the intention of using them in their provocations. They have certainly taken similar actions in other countries of Central and Eastern Europe, including Poland. That is why they are so dangerous and effective at the same time." Stanisław Żaryn, Deputy Minister, Coordinator of Special Services of the Republic of Poland, wrote, "Russian propaganda hasn't changed the tactics of its info-war efforts against Poland, set in the context of the war in Ukraine for a while. The Kremlin persistently seeks to divide Poles and Ukrainians." Moving on to specifics, let's look at examples of Russia's actions aimed at conflicting Poles and Ukrainians. Poland wants to partition Ukraine. Neither the Polish government nor any major political force in Poland raised the demand for a revision of the borders with Ukraine. Russia, however, has tried to drag Poland in its game. As former Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski revealed in 2008, Vladimir Putin made a proposal to then Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk for a joint partition of Ukraine. Sikorski said this: "Suggestions of Polish participation in the partition of Ukraine were made during Donald Tusk's visit to Moscow. Putin said that Ukraine is an artificial state, that Lviv is a Polish city, and that it is worth dealing with it together." Donald Tusk did not comment on the proposal, knowing that he was being recorded. For many years, however, Russian propaganda has been scaring Ukrainians with Polish plans for an alleged military action to take back territories that once belonged to Poland and beyond. This is how an expert from the Center for Eastern Studies puts it. Let's listen. According to Russian propaganda, at the moment we are dealing with the creeping annexation of Ukraine, and Poland intends to absorb all of Ukraine, starting from the eastern borderlands that once belonged to it. But it will not be limited to Ukraine, because in prospect there is also a planned invasion of Belarus, as well as an attack on Moscow, a march on Moscow. The goals of those who today call themselves allies of Ukraine may also include the partition of that country. Such plans are seriously considered in some European capitals. We know that for some of the higher political circles in Poland, there is the idea of creating a greater state, from sea to sea, Baltic to Black. Before World War II, they talked a lot about it. It was a fixed idea. From the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, now we see the embrace of the leaders of Poland and Ukraine. And this idiocy is still alive. And the idea of absorbing Ukraine is current. But almost no one knows about it. It is found only in archival documents. Russian Foreign Ministry chief Sergei Lavrov lied in June 2022 that Poland was appropriating Ukraine and abstracting peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. For the time being, we see that behind the talks of unacceptability of any dialogue with Russia, Polish colleagues are beginning to actively seize Ukrainian territory. Russian Federation Security Council Secretary Nikolai Petrushev also lied in May 2022, claiming, as all indications point to, Poland is already undertaking activities related to the occupation of the western territories of Ukraine. Russian disinformation can use even the weather forecast to divide Poland and Ukrainians. They have crafted a graphic with a supposed frame from public television with a map which they have redrawn, showing part of western Ukraine annexed to Poland. In a similar way, that is, by producing a video in which they put up a fake poster depicting a made-up recruitment campaign for the Polish army. On the poster, Russian propagandists write this: "Stand up for the real Polish lands. Become a Leopard tank driver. Defend Poland and Ukraine." Campaigns against war refugees from Ukraine. From the very beginning of the refugee crisis behind Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there has been content circulated by Russian trolls on social media to discourage Poles from helping refugees. Fictional stories about Ukrainian women seducing their husbands in the homes where they found refuge were very popular. This was intended to frighten Polish women and discourage them from accepting refugees. Just as often, there were made-up stories about Ukrainians in Poland using various services, such as hairdressers, restaurants, and living without paying. This was intended to portray Ukrainians as ungrateful people, thinking they were entitled to everything, and Poles as naive and exploited. There were also appeals by Ukrainians to Ukrainians, the actual purpose of which was to show that many Ukrainians extort money and abuse Polish hospitality. These appeals were recorded in Polish, which means that their recipients were not supposed to be Ukrainians at all, but actually Poles. Ukrainians were portrayed as the cause of the problem in accessing public services in Poland. Information was disseminated that refugees have priority in hospitals, causing Poles to die waiting for help. Fostering such fears not only breeds resentment towards refugees, but also undermines trust in public authorities, as according to this narrative, they act to the detriment of their citizens and favor refugees, which of course is false. Remember these stories because perhaps in a similar way someone will want to quarrel your nation with another. Ukrainian insurgent army's crimes against Poles during World War II. The Ukrainian insurgent army in 1943-1944 committed genocide and ethnic cleansing against Poles in Volhynia and areas of eastern Lesser Poland. This is a cruel crime, the victims of which were not properly commemorated, and the people responsible for it are today recognized in Ukraine as heroes of the struggle for independence. Their participation in the genocide of Poles is passed over in silence or explained by the complexity of the situation. This is a real and still unresolved problem in Polish-Ukrainian relations. For this reason, it is a convenient topic for Russian propaganda. They try to present it in such a way that Poles, influenced by negative emotions, start acting against their own interests and stop supporting Ukraine. It is in the interest of both Poland and Ukraine to find an agreement on the ground of historical truth and to properly commemorate the victims of this crime. This process is ongoing. It is difficult for both sides. Reaching an agreement will require a lot of effort, goodwill, and wisdom. The crimes of the Ukrainian insurgent army, however, must not be a pretext to stop the joint struggle against Russian imperialism, which is what the Russian Federation is trying to achieve, and which both the authorities in Kiev and Warsaw are aware of. Despite so many efforts by Russia, Polish-Ukrainian relations have not been as good as they are today. Although there is no shortage of real problems, and Russia continues to add fuel to the proverbial fire, Poles and Ukrainians are united in the fight against Russian imperialism.